Yeah, I hope that you hearing me. This is the future, all about cybersecurity. Talking about the hackers, I'm just trying to warn you. From the one and only legend, the Cyber Informer. Hey, thanks for joining the podcast. Time to get it hype. This I know you gonna like, giving you some insight. They try to hack in your database, homie, not today. Thinking they can escape with your data and without a trace. Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah. This is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.
It's time for Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast, the podcast. This is episode 12, Application Control. This episode is brought to you by Loyal IT Solutions. For all of your IT business needs, visit loyalit.com.au for more information on how we can help your business. And by the Gosford Erina Business Chamber. To have your business voice heard, become a member now. Visit us at gebc.com.au. And by the Australian Federal Government. Welcome to Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast, the podcast. I'm Michael Trimblett, the Cyber Informer at cyber_informer on Twitter, and this is going to be another busy podcast. This month in the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast initiative is application control, so we'll talk a bit about that. We'll also pick apart the last podcast, Eugene's Instagram hack, by talking cookies and social engineering, and we'll see what happened in the real world. We have a bit to get through in this episode, so let's get started. In the last episode, I spoke to Eugene Orr about his Instagram hack. Before we get into today's topic, which is application control, we'll deconstruct what happened here with Eugene. Without recapping the entire story, the crux of it was he was contacted by one of his many followers asking for help. Being a good Samaritan, he agreed to assist. After a few minutes of back and forwarding, he was sent a link via text message, which he was asked to paste the link into the chat box he was chatting in on his phone. Upon doing so, his Instagram app screen went blank and he had lost control of his account. At the end of the last podcast, I gave a brief technical description of what I thought had happened, which is his Instagram cookie was stolen. So now I thought would be a good opportunity to dig a little further into what likely happened and to have a deeper dive into what a cookie is and why losing it to a hacker is not good. So what are cookies? Thanks to the European General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR legislation, we see the notification where we must accept the use of cookies on many websites we visit. Thanks to this law, if you provide goods and services to any country in the EU, you must have that warning on your website and allow an opt-out. This is because of data privacy laws in the European Union. HTTP cookies, or simply cookies as we'll call them, are small text files which are used by websites to help keep your session. In other words, to identify you to the website. There are two different types of cookies, session and persistent. Session cookies are used only when navigating a website and stored in your computer's RAM, therefore never written to the hard disk. When the session ends, in other words, the tab or the web browser is closed, or when you navigate away from the website, session cookies are automatically deleted. They also help the back button work. Again, cookies are just a small piece of text that help with navigation. Persistent cookies can stay on your computer forever. However, the cookie can include an expiration date and time and will be automatically removed from the browser when that date and time is reached. Persistent cookies are used for two primary purposes. 1. Authentication. This tracks whether a user is logged into a website or not. The user will be issued a unique cookie which looks like a long line of random characters. This cookie is your identity, which when you go to a web page of a particular website, the cookie is sent to the server, and if the cookie is valid and the server recognizes it, you will be logged into your account. 2. Cookies can also be used for tracking, which is what the GDPR is trying to warn about. These cookies track multiple visits to the same website over time. Some online merchants, for example, use cookies to track visits from particular users, including the pages and products viewed. The information they gain allows them to suggest other items that may be of interest to visitors. Gradually, a profile is built based on a user's browsing history on that site. This is very useful for advertisers. Can you think of any social media or large search engines that would want to build a profile of you to sell to you? They use cookies to do this. We spoke last month about hardening your web browser to disable third-party cookies. This means websites such as Facebook will not be able to see your browsing or purchases on websites that are not Facebook. So I think we're starting to get a picture of what cookies are and how important they are to have a good user experience and how powerful they are to advertising companies. But what's the big deal with cookies? Cookies provide a persistent connection to a website or web service. In other words, your login. And because these cookies can be set to expire after a period of time set by the website operator, if the expiration is a long time in the future, then websites can specifically request the cookie in order to track you. For instance, let's look at Facebook. Now, Facebook is not the only one to do this, but it's the one you might be able to relate to the most. You log into Facebook, and every time you go back to Facebook in your browser, it is still logged in. This is convenient because you don't have to log in every time you open your web browser. Your cookie hasn't expired and it's still valid, so Facebook lets you straight in. Google, Apple, and Microsoft, amongst others, do this too. As cookies are set to expire after a period of time, I thought I would look at my Facebook cookie. And in early March 2022, I have a Facebook cookie that doesn't expire until November 2023, more than 18 months. So even if I don't go back to Facebook for 18 months, I will still be, in essence, logged into Facebook from that computer. Facebook has the ability to track my movements, even though I may not want to go anywhere near Facebook for the next 18 months. That's kind of scary. But hang on. What happens if you were to lose control of that cookie? In other words, you visited a website that compelled your browser to hand over your persistent authentication cookie. A website that gave a hacker my login cookie to Facebook, which doesn't expire for 18 months? It's just a bunch of random characters that identifies you as logged into the Facebook website. If the hacker could get your cookies' random characters, they could replace their cookies' random characters with your cookies' random characters, and bam, they've logged in as you. And truly, it is as simple as that. The hacker doesn't know your username or password. They simply have your login cookie. Luckily, websites are becoming savvy to this, so it is becoming increasingly harder to pull off. But what if it isn't hard to pull off? What if you could send a link to someone and when clicked, their cookie information is displayed on your screen? This is something called cross-site scripting, or XSS attacks. The Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, is a non-profit foundation that works to improve the security of software. Amongst other things, they track the different types of exploits that are being used by hackers. In 2021, cross-site scripting ranked as number 3 in their top 10 list of attacks. So this sort of attack is being used, and I would say it is being used rather successfully. This is why I believe Eugene was a victim of cookie stealing rather than anything else more nefarious on his phone. Further to this, Eugene sent me the link he was asked to copy into his Instagram chat, and I ran it through my website analyzer. It was interesting. There was a lot of code in the website it took me to that played around with cookies. It was really complex code, way over my head, but when you look through it, you could see references to cookies throughout the website code, further adding to my diagnosis of a cookie stealing attack. Now, this would never have happened without the ability to socially engineer Eugene. The hacker could have randomly sent him a link in his email and waited for him to click on the link. This is known as phishing. Perhaps it would have been caught by a spam filter and he would never have received the email. This is also another reason not to click on random links in email. But the advantage the hacker had was he knew Eugene was logged into the Instagram at that point because he was communicating with him. So if he tricked him into using the link that was specifically designed to send an Instagram cookie, he must have been logged in for it to work. So just feed him a believable story, use the link, and now they have your login cookie. Therefore, full control of the Instagram account. This leads us to our next topic, social engineering. I have a video over at loyalit.com.au/YouTube called What is Social Engineering, which discusses the many different ways people can get scammed with social engineering. Often the weakest link in technology is the user or human using the technology. According to Google, social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. In other words, social engineering is the art of manipulating a person or a group of people into providing information or a service they otherwise would never have given. Sounds just like what happened to Eugene. He was contacted by one of his followers who he had built a level of trust with, asking for help. He helped and ended up having his account hacked. Now's a good time to talk about some of the ways hackers will attempt to socially engineer you. This will be a brief recap of the social engineering video on YouTube, so if you have watched it, this will not be new to you. But for those who haven't watched it, we'll talk through the major points. First of all, why does social engineering work? Human nature in trusting others. In other words, how many times have you handed over personal or sensitive information because you trust the person? Ignorance of social engineering efforts. This is probably the most common. People give information out because they are not aware they are being socially engineered. Fear. How many times have you been questioned for information from a superior and you have given information you probably shouldn't have because you feared for your job or consequences of not giving out information? What if someone used that fear by impersonating a superior to get information out of you? Greed. I think we've all seen the promise of riches from the Nigerian prince scam emails. The promise of easy money is always enticing, especially when there is a plausible story. A sense of moral obligation. Someone might provide information because they feel it is right to do so, rather than considering the legal or privacy concerns. This isn't just handing over information. It could be holding an otherwise locked door open for someone who has their hands full. This one maybe not so much in small business because everyone typically knows everyone else in the business, but what about in an enterprise or in a campus where you can't know everyone or what access they should have? This is an example of someone who is an inside attacker without knowing they are one. What are the factors that allow for social engineering to happen? Insufficient training. Do your staff know what information should be kept private? Are they aware of authorized people or third parties they can share information with? Are they aware of social engineering practices hackers employ? All of these are factors in staff training. Unregulated information access or physical access. Does an unauthorized person have access to the shared drive where you keep confidential files? What about the filing cabinet that stores employee information? Both logical and physical security needs to be implemented to protect data. Complex organizational structure. Not usually a problem in small business, however, it can be a problem when management changes occur or as the business grows. Lack of security policies. Not having clear security policies is also a factor in people being socially engineered. If you don't have clear policies, any request in a grey area may mean the person being asked the question will divulge the information. In small and medium business, insufficient training and lack of security policies are the most common, followed by unregulated information access, then organizational structure complexity. Just like everything else in the hacking world, social engineering has a framework. Social engineering is a non-technical method of attacking systems, which means it's not limited to people with technical know-how. It's simple, effective, and near impossible to contain. The stages of an attack are research, which includes dumpster diving, visit websites, tour the company, etc. You can learn a lot about businesses by looking at public information or even going through their trash. Have you ever thrown away a post-it note with a password written on it? Select the victim. Identify a frustrated employee or promising target. Is there a new receptionist, obviously just out of school? Is someone expressing how frustrated they are with work on social media? These are targets that may be susceptible to a social engineering attack. Develop a relationship. In Eugene's case, a relationship was already there, so the hacker didn't have to do much to convince him. However, building a relationship with the target is important. Have you had a contractor or tradie come into the business who you instantly like because they are smiling, being more personable, and are willing to have a chat? These friendly people are much easier to trust than the abrasive or quiet contractor. People who are trying to socially engineer you will have these instantly likable traits. The faster they can build a relationship or trust, the faster they can exploit it. The final step is exploit the relationship by collecting sensitive information. After social engineers obtain the trust of their unsuspecting victims, they exploit the relationship and coax the victims into divulging more information than they should. Once they have the information they are after, they can then attack. After the social engineer has the information they were after, what do the attacks look like? There are three broad categories of social engineering: human-based, computer-based, and mobile-based. I won't go into detail about each of these because they are covered in detail in the video at loyalit.com.au/YouTube. However, human-based social engineering is what Eugene fell victim to, more specifically an impersonation attack. Impersonation is the most popular form of social engineering. The social engineer pretends to be someone they are not, and that person is something the target either respects, fears, or trusts. In Eugene's case, it was trust. Okay, let's move on to our main topic of the podcast, application control. If you've watched the application control video in the Cybersecurity Academy or on the YouTube channel at loyalit.com.au/YouTube, you will have seen how clunky application control can be, but also how powerful it can be in preventing malware running on your computer. There are third-party applications. One I am quite bullish on, called AirLock, but it can be expensive and is only now starting to make inroads to the SME market after being an enterprise-only solution. I'm currently trialing the product and I like it, but it could be outshone by a product called SentinelOne, which is an endpoint detection and response, or EDR software. This isn't technically an application control software product, but could easily be the perfect balance between an antivirus and application control, and I'll tell you why. SentinelOne EDR is a product that is designed to complement your antivirus software. From the Team Ascend website, this is what an EDR does. Once EDR technology is installed, it uses advanced algorithms to analyze the behaviors and individual users of your system, allowing it to remember and connect their activities. In the same way that you often notice when something feels off or different about someone you're close to, the technology can sense behavior that is out of the ordinary for a given user on your system. The data is immediately filtered, enriched, and monitored for signs of malicious behavior. These signs trigger an alarm and the investigation begins, determining if it is a true or false positive. If malicious activity is detected, the algorithm tracks the path of the attack back to the entry point. The technology then consolidates all data points into narrow categories called malicious operations to make it easier for analysts to review. In the event of a true hit, the customer is notified and given actionable response steps and recommendations for further investigation and advanced forensics. If it is a false positive, the alarm is closed, investigation notes are added, and the customers are not notified. So that was a long explanation, but it hits the nail on the head. Antivirus alone is prone to false negatives. Perfect example of this was a couple of weeks back, Loyal IT had a client that had to recover from a ransomware attack. This is the first time we had to deal with something like this for a long time, as people are becoming more savvy about clicking on bad links in email, and the antivirus is capable of detecting viruses. However, unlike EDR, which looks at learned behavior, antivirus works by way of signatures. Antivirus has a database of signatures which are like fingerprints of malicious software, which are updated frequently, usually a few times per day. If a product's action matches the signature, then it is detected, killed, and removed or quarantined. Bypassing antivirus is taught in hacking schools and can be surprisingly easy to do. For example, there is a memory hacking tool called Mimikatz, which I talk about in the Q&A video, Hacking Case Studies in the Academy and YouTube. Back before the antivirus companies became wise to it, you could grab the Mimikatz source code and recompile it as Mimidogs. This simple change would allow the malicious program to run on a computer without it being detected by an antivirus product. Simple, huh? This is why EDR is recommended as an additional layer to antivirus. Antivirus is the front line, and EDR does a virtual pat-down of anything the antivirus determines to be benign. EDR will interrogate it further and watch for suspicious activity. Suspicious activity includes the mass encryption of files. But it can be difficult to work out what is malicious and what isn't, because computers encrypt and decrypt files all the time. This is why you need the AI of an EDR on your side. For more information, I've just this week released a Q&A video on SentinelOne. Check it out, as you will see more detail on how it works and some of the in-depth reporting SentinelOne can provide. Now let's move on to what happened in the real world in the last month. It was a surprisingly quiet month on the security front. We're still seeing some talk of the Log4j vulnerability, but vendors have seemingly been responsive to this vulnerability, which, whilst was a major flaw, it has been largely mitigated, thankfully. As we record this podcast in early March, we have a total of 196 Windows vulnerabilities patched to date, with 9 being ranked as critical, but surprisingly 0 are known to be exploited. Don't forget to keep updating your computers, because we don't know when one of these will be exploited. This month's challenge. Last time I issued you a challenge to harden your browser. Have you done it? It's super easy, so you have no excuse. Check out the how-to user application hardening video in the Academy, which shows how to harden your browser in the major browsers Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. This month, I don't have a challenge for you. It's simply too hard to implement application control in Windows without a third-party software. Instead, I suggest you speak with your IT company about implementing an EDR product to help bolster your defenses. Okay, well, let's wrap up the podcast. As mentioned previously, we've postponed our live events at Julie's Place with no reschedule available just yet. Please keep your eyes open for more details on our socials and on Loyal IT's Facebook page, and we'll update you on a future podcast. Thanks for listening. Head over to Facebook and follow our page at facebook.com/CSBCAPCC. Follow our other social pages as well at CSBCAPCC on Twitter, which will keep you updated on everything cybersecurity, business, connect and protect Central Coast related. You can also follow my Twitter account, which is at cyber_informer. Thanks to the federal government, the content on the Cybersecurity Academy is now free for all, Head over to loyalit.com.au/academy to sign up. We also now have a YouTube channel. Visit loyalit.com.au/YouTube to view all of the great content. March is the final month of the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect initiative, so next podcast will be the last in the series. Before we get to that though, we'll release a couple of videos which uncovers what the perfectly secure small-medium business looks like, and I'll talk more about that in our final podcast. A quick reminder that the Gosford Erina Business Chamber has a new podcast called Open Chamber. If you do business on the Central Coast and want to keep up with what's going on in the business world, this podcast is for you. Search Open Chamber on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or visit gebc.com.au/podcast to listen. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the podcast using your favourite podcatcher and follow us on social media. Until next time, stay safe online.
Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.